When I was 9 years old, my dad took me to see Supernova at the Galaxy 16 Cinemaplex. I didn't remember the name of the movie before I started writing this story. The only thing I did remember, burned into my memory, was the final shot of the film. As the aforementioned supernova envelops the spaceship, the last two surviving astronauts of the mission escape by entering hyperspace while sheltering in a pod. When they emerge, they have each swapped one eye for the others. I don't know what about that concluding shot was so moving to me, but it may be because my child mind blacked out all of the preceding film. From what I've read, after years in production hell, what remained of this James Spader and Angela Bassett vehicle was akin to Hellraiser in outer space. I shouldn't have been allowed to watch it in theaters. But this was the type of movie my dad and I always watched together when I was staying at his house. Family bonding time on the occasions it did happen with my dad meant sitting in the living room together and silently watching rented DVDs of all variations of science fiction, but more often than not, other bad space exploration action horrors. Pitch Black, Red Planet, Mission to Mars are the ones I remember most clearly and associate with these weekend nights. This ritual set me up to love science fiction for the rest of my life. My tastes began to deviate from his by high school, though. I was less interested in horror and alien attacks and more intrigued by the storytelling, world building, technology, and biology imagined. When I grew up on Resident Evil, I matured into preferring In the Flesh. I watched all 4 seasons of Battlestar Galactica in 6 days while locked in my bedroom in my dad's house during college. The detail alarms me in retrospect. The Portlandia sketch is not off base, but the more I thought about it, the more I remembered what watching the show helped me block out. I remember why I wanted a reason not to leave my room or interact with my father that summer. I remember why I wanted something loud and dramatic to drown out the sound of the YouTube videos about Prozac and Sharia law and the Illuminati. I remember why I didn't want to sit with him for dinner while he explained that he and I descended from intelligent alien life forms, and that's why we were so much smarter than everyone else. My love of science fiction became a love of science and a love of fiction. For my father, he began to mistake fiction for science and science for fiction. Dad and I had not shared anything with each other for many years before he reached this point. By 2003, after a new marriage, I began living with my mother full-time for several years to avoid a hostile home environment at his place. This marriage ended in 2008 when I was 17, and out of a sense of duty, I began living with him again so that he wouldn't be alone. For many reasons, not least of which the fact that I was still a child, I was not equipped to prevent my father from slipping into a dark and lonely space in the grasp of the internet. Maybe he always had been a conspiracy theorist in a way, and he just never talked to me about it. But beginning that year, I learned to quietly wait him out as he explained something or other he'd read or fabricated. As I said, I don't remember a lot of it. I coped by keeping to myself a lot of the time. Over the last 10 years, he mellowed out a little. He has never backed down from his red pill perspective, but he's at the very least learned to not talk about his theories with me. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that he just stopped talking to me about everything. He did not tell me for months about his heart failure that he learned about in 2018. He has been uninsured for 2 decades, but he qualified for treatment at a teaching hospital with all bills waived. And after he told me, I became the dutiful daughter again. I worked hard from Houston with his many friends in his hometown to raise money to sustain him until he could fully recover from the surgery. Many of my friends pitched in with outright donations or with auction pieces, and I am so grateful to them for that. This chapter culminated in May of 2019. By May of 2020, a lot of things about the world had changed, but other than his new heart valve, my father had not. When the pandemic flared up, I called him regularly to make sure he was paying attention and taking precautions. During these calls, he spoke carefully. From his perspective, I simply have not yet woken up to what he knows, but maybe someday I will. And he just has to take it easy with me when he tells me the truth until I am ready to believe it. However, when I asked if he had any masks and if I could send him some in the mail, he let it all come out. He believed the virus originated from a Canadian research lab working on an AIDS vaccine that Chinese researchers visited, stole, and then somehow just let loose into the population before it was ready. Never mind how a coronavirus has anything to do with HIV or any of the other details that fall apart under any scrutiny. This setup would get a low Rotten Tomato score for sure. He refuses to wear masks. He refused to let me buy some to send to him. He told me all the things that by now we have heard many people say, but his ultimate stance on the matter is, if someone dies from this disease, including him, we should just let that be. His life, his friends' lives, theoretically my life, and I did ask him that specifically, isn't worth the inconvenience society has been asked to take. If he was going to be this careless with his own life and others, I wish he'd have let us all know a long time ago. Typically, by now, the dad in the movie has realized that his hubris has caused more harm than good, and maybe everyone should have taken this seriously from the beginning. I am frustrated that this is the way he has decided this story will go for him, but I understand why he is taken by it so easily. It helps make sense of so many things for him. So much of the perceived persecution suddenly made sense with these fictions explaining them away. I haven't called him since this argument. I can no longer entertain these fictions, but I added Event Horizon to my Netflix queue, and I think about him. I know enough about him and his background to understand why it's easy for him to see the world this way. It makes more sense to him as a convoluted plot than real life otherwise would. I don't think he will end up seeing things as I do, though. He's been permanently altered by this point, and I think that by now he is light years away.